never run without guns.
Never run because there's a trait in the group. So he fell into cliche as quickly as Fleming did.
Absolutely. Now, Maclean's obituary was written for the Scotsman by Alan Massey, who's a fine writer, fine novelist. And he said he lacked the ability of a Buchan or an Ambler, and it's unlikely that his books will last. Something which would not have bothered him at all. He wrote books to make air journeys tolerable and to take people out of themselves for a few hours, and he did it very well. And he's got his formula was you needed a hero, a band of men, hostile climate, ruthless enemy, and often as not a Judas figure who almost upsets the mission. And an interesting comment on him, Ian Rankin, who was asked at bloody Scotland last year, I think, or the year before, said he started writing, when he started writing, he wanted to write not to become Dostoevsky, but he wanted to write something that his dad would read. And his dad was reading Alistair MacLean. And it was years before he realised MacLean was a Scot.
That thing you said about who he wrote his books for, the famous Fleming line about he wrote his books to be read by warm-blooded heterosexuals in trains and planes, so if you're gay, forget it.
Right, so those are our first two kingpins.
There's a starting point, so we know
Ice Station and Zebra, and I shall get somebody who's sitting over there very annoyed by saying that I think, in my humble, well, not so humble opinion, that's the last good one he did. I think he went down after.
That's for a separate conversation. That's for a separate conversation.
That's good. There's only one way to decide.
So now we move on to the backup bombs.
Now we're moving on. Those are our two strands. Okay?
Yep.
Spies, and we've got the events.
So develop the bomb strand.
Where Eagle's Dare fit in? Was that after?
He went back to war stories, basically. It was about 1969. It was when he came back. He ran Jamaica Inn. Daphne du Maurier. He actually bought the inn, and it was a disaster. It was rubbish at it, and it was decided he'd better write another book. He was going to retire.
That's a great little piece of little-known information.
Yes,
keeping up your sleeve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have we got an illustration?
We have.
Okay.
Back to spies.
It's Francis Clifford, I hope.
Yeah.
Is this Francis Clifford? Okay. I'm going to give you this for free. Francis Clifford. Go out there and read this man. He's utterly forgotten, I think we would agree.
By some.
Not by some, and some people have republished his books. He's a terrific, neglected thriller writer.
Got the cover up?
Okay, why not the first cover? The Naked Runner. Anybody remember the film with Frank Sinatra?
Yeah.
He's forced to commit an assassination, blackmail because his son has been kidnapped. But Clifford was one of these men who had World War II in his DNA. Always part of the way he writes. But he is a good writer. Not every thriller writer can use language the way someone like Francis Clifford did. You published The Grosvenor Square Goodbye.
And Time is an Ambush.
Grosvenor Square Goodbye is a multi-faceted novel about an assassination in, surprisingly, Grosvenor Square, in which a whole team of characters are orchestrated. They're a really large dramatis personae, aren't they? I prefer Time is an Ambush. Usually it's an Englishman abroad in trouble, which is always a good recipe for a thriller.
Is this your book?
That's one I've
cover.
That's
Okay, you want to move on to the next one? Who is?
Is it
Alan Williams?
It's Alan Williams. Okay, here's your second one I give to you for free. Right, who in this audience knows who Emlyn Williams is? A couple of yes, not all just grey heads are putting the hair up there. Okay. Emlyn Williams, terrific playwright in his day, largely forgotten now. That's his son, and for me he's the better writer. He really is the heir apparent of Eric Ambler, who we're going to get to later, aren't we? Long Run South. They're always about Englishmen abroad making the wrong moral decisions, sleeping with the wrong women, with a terrifically evoked sense of place. The heat of the jungle is one of I can't understand how he's totally fallen off the radar, except for you. What have you published?
We've done Snakewater,
which is one of the best.
Tale of the Lazy Dog.
Those are the three.
Which is a classic. It's a heist. Tale is a heist book set in Vietnam before it got heavy. In fact, it was Cambodia, Vietnam. And the idea is to steal a plane load of US currency. There's been, huge payroll for the army. But I mean, it's billions. You need a plane. And there's a lot of there's also double crossing. There's a very good, he didn't have a serious hero, he had a serious villain, didn't he?
Yes,
Paul, Frenchman. A lot of double crossing, and eventually the plane is diverted, and the guys, the criminals, the heroes, don't get away with it because they land where they're not expecting it. And it was the first book I ever read as a teenager which contained an expletive that's always fucked, right?
What could it be? We all wondered.
And it's actually the last word of the book. And when the plane lands, and one of the guys opens the doors and says, "We're in North Vietnam." Fuck! And that's it.
You see, that's better than when they reissued Catcher in the Rye and put the word fuck back in. Because we all knew what that word was on the side that he didn't want his sister Phoebe to see. We know what that word is. So it's less shocking.
I think you're right.
You mentioned those are the three. Long Run South is the one I go.
And he always, often he had journalist heroes who got killed as well.
Yes,
he killed off his heroes.
And then you
carry on.
So, John Gardner, thank you. Yes, I'm trying to remember who these middle-aged men who keep pleasure.
Should we do the book covers first?
Okay, so John Gardner. Boise Oaks, anybody?
Oh yeah.
Anti-James Bond. He's created I think these guys are hypocrites, some of them. So, much as I like his work, he's a hypocrite. He doesn't like Fleming. And like Len Leighton, who he knows personally, they express their dislike of Ian Fleming. Now, at least Leighton did write a different kind of book altogether. He then proceeds to write these sort of comic burlesques of Bond novels, in which a useless guy who's been mistaken for a hero. There's a Rod Taylor movie, which you might remember, with a great title sequence.
Eric Sykes as an assassin.
Eric Sykes is the assassin who does the killing. He's hired as the liquidator, but he gets Eric Sykes to do the killing. I don't know if the Americans in this room think that, really. Who would be the analogy for Eric Sykes?
A kind of cheap Jerry Lewis or something.
Jerry Lewis,
really?
Sort of.
A good writer, but because he wrote several other series which we're not going to necessarily talk about here.
Except, if you just flick back to the picture of him.
Black, sorry.
Yeah. The portrait in the background is Ian Fleming.
So then, of course, he proceeded to write.
I'm assuming everybody knows.
Yes, he wrote a series of Bond books which are now being written by diverse hands with diverse success. His books are interesting because he does try to bring Bond for the first time into the modern age. Bond is trying to smoke less. He's taking notice of that health message that Fleming got. He sleeps with one woman per book, and which was also the case with Timothy Dalton, who took over about that time. And John Gardner wrote, of course, the movie tie-ins for the Timothy Dalton movies. I read them again recently. They don't wear that well. But then neither does Sebastian Faulks. And neither does Jeffrey Deaver. Anybody going to argue with me here? No.
William Boyd wasn't bad.
William Boyd was okay. Yeah.
Well, at Cyborg, didn't he also write two or three really good Moriarty?
Yes, Moriarty he did.
He wrote a novel after this period. The period we took at, he was the spoof spy novel. Really, that's why he's involved in this here.
Well, we should mention Herbie Kruger.
Yeah.
So he wrote a series with a tough agent. So that's quite a prolific career.
Yeah. And I think that's your lot, isn't it? And we're moving over to...
No.
I've got one more. Yeah, my favourite. A man I had a meal with once a year. There he is. Anybody know who that is? Anybody know a woman whose psychic is called Willie Garvin?
I think it's psychic. It's psychic.
Sidekick, mostly. I would have a meal with that man once a year. He would come to Victoria. He's allowed me one personal reminiscence here. He'd come to Victoria. We would have a meal. He'd get back on the train. That was it. And we would just have this fantastic meal once a year.
You have that effect on everybody.
I do, yes. I wonder why you get that. And the problem I had with him was that Quentin Tarantino wanted to make Modesty Blaise. Modesty Blaise is...
Have you actually said who it is?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Have I said Peter O'Donnell?
Yeah.
Peter O'Donnell. Modesty Blaise is the best heroine of modern fiction. She's not a male wet dream fantasy. She's a capable woman. And her survival in the books is completely justified. Her and Willie Garvin. We are always told how they survive. It's not always through strength, it's through ingenuity. The books are impeccably plotted, all of them. And of course he wrote a long-running comic strip illustrated by Jim Holden.
Which came first?
The comic strip.
Right.
So in fact that book there is not the first Modesty Blaise novel. That is a novelization of the screenplay for the awful Monica Vitti, Doug Bogart film. Anybody see that?
Yeah.
Which is played totally for laughs.
Who was Willie? That was
Terence Stamp. And they break into song. They've got Doug Bogart, who's perfect casting as the villain, but just takes the money and just plays it for laughs and stuff. So Sabretooth, which I think you might have a...
I don't know.
Okay, Sabretooth is the first Modesty Blaise novel.
I didn't know that.
Well, we would meet for just the person